Alrighty. All right. We're live on Facebook or YouTube, excuse me, and we should be up on Facebook momentarily here. Yep. We're good to go there. Let me adjust the camera a little bit. All right. Welcome in. It's Tuesday night, as we have for most Tuesdays since this pandemic started back in, March is when it really hit stateside. We're here talking Georgia football, and boy, oh boy, is there a lot of news to talk and discuss about today. You have Greg Sankey issuing another statement. You have some Georgia players now, I think, more substantially speaking out on how they feel and what they want to do going forward. You have what might be the end of Justin Fields' college career with what happened in the Big Ten and Ohio State. We'll give everyone about a minute or two to sort of get in here and before we dive into what figures to be a fairly loaded show of topics and plenty of things to discuss. Clarence Dawson, good to see you. Keith Bradshaw, Mark McDowell, Tim Taylor. Welcome in, guys. It has been, as they say, it has been a day. David Johnson, Jacob O'Neill, welcome in. Good to see you guys. It's been a day in college football. It's probably, I imagine, unless the Big 12 makes a decision and the Big 12 is Big 12 is set to meet later today, or actually is meeting right now. I don't think there's going to be a decision that comes from them, but until that happens, it's going to be a busy and sort of speculative days ahead with college football. As now, we're 2 minutes in, I feel like we can dive into the big news of the day. There will not be any football played in the Big Ten or in the Pac-12, and Houston Evans, I think you sum it up pretty correctly. I'm really concerned. This sucks. This, I do believe, makes it tougher to have a season this year because eventually, if the Big 12 does decide to join the Pac-12 and Big Ten and not having a conference season, I think it gets tougher from both an optics standpoint and from what the data is potentially telling these conferences, specifically when it comes to myocarditis, the health disease issue that has sort of become in my understanding, the big reason why the Big Ten and the Pac-12 have changed so quickly, and what, from a week ago, they were putting out schedules and discussing, in the Big Ten's case, a September 3rd start, and now they're not going to be playing this fall. So a lot has changed with this, and in the days to come and in the days ahead, from a college football fan standpoint, which bottom line I am, it's really disappointing and it stinks. Oftentimes when I'm working long days covering college football, covering Georgia football games, I end up getting back late at night, and only games that I'm really able to watch and throw on are those Pac-12 games, and that's gone now. Now, the SEC has said that they're going to try and continue to follow the advice of their doctors and their medical experts and push through. Pull a statement here from Greg Sankey on what he had said today. He released a statement roughly around 6 o'clock. Both the SEC and the ACC have come out and said that they're going to continue to try and push forward and follow the plan that they had laid out. Greg Sankey said today, "I look forward to learning more about the factors that led to the Big Ten and Pac-12 leadership to take these actions today. I remain comfortable with the thorough and deliberate approach that the SEC and our 14 members are taking to support a healthy environment for our student athletes. We will continue to further refine our policies and protocols for a safe return to sports as we monitor developments around COVID-19 in a continued effort to support, educate, and care for our student athletes every day." That's what Greg Sankey had to say today. And look, this is how, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 made the decision to go ahead and sort of pull the plug and call it a season. The SEC, based on what their medical experts are saying, and believe me, going forward, what the medical experts are going to say is going to be paramount in there being a season based off what we've heard from both Greg Sankey and I believe John Swofford, the commissioner of the ACC. So, and I'm seeing a lot of Facebook comments bringing up well, if you can have all these students back on campus, why can't you have college football? And if the NFL can play, the NCAA can play. Do not get it twisted here. These conferences are saying, health concerns. I believe at the end of the day, well, yes, the health concerns are paramount and extremely important and a reason to potentially make the decision. it's the liability for these universities. It's the worry that the potential, and while yes, the numbers say that, it's statistically very improbable that a player died from COVID-19, the risk of that, I believe, is just making it too rich for these Big Ten, for these Pac-12 presidents who made the decision today. It's making it too difficult for them to go ahead and make that decision to play this season. And because of that, you're not going to see Ohio State, Michigan. You're not going to see a lot of great college football games. And, as someone who covers the sport and as someone who is worried, I would not be surprised if, maybe not this week or the next week, but eventually, if the SEC does decide to pull the plug, I think this could, much like we saw with the SEC going to a conference-only format, when it comes to games, that's what the Big Ten and the Pac-12 decided to do first. Keith Finley, sad day in college football. It absolutely is. Now, there have been, some talks about the ACC and the SEC and some lesser conferences as well. I believe the Sun Belt and Conference USA saying they're going to try and push through and still have a season. The data, for the most part, still is what the data is. So from that standpoint, it'll be interesting to see, how much of an iron stomach, so to say, the SEC and the ACC have on this issue, where if the numbers are what the numbers are, we'll sort of see where they go from there. And if the numbers improve, then on the one hand, I expect there to be college football, or not college football. I expect there to be football on television this fall. It'll just be NFL on Saturdays. If college football is totally willing to cede the platform, the NFL will gladly step in with more games on Saturdays. So, college football, I think, does have to be very careful in terms of where they go and what comes next with this, because I know a lot of people have thrown out there that what a spring season might look like. And I'm probably in that, obviously I believe that the Big Ten and the Pac-12 are going to try to have a season, but at the same point in time, it's looking very unlikely, and it would not surprise me in the slightest if the next time you see college football, it's potentially not even until September of 2021 when Georgia is set to play Clemson. So I think that's something that is very much on the table now with the way things are going. And, a couple of commenters have really hit the nail on the head that it's just a sad and tough day for college football. Obviously, it stinks that the Big Ten and the Pac-12 came to those decisions. The SEC, the Big 12, and the ACC are going to try and have seasons as of right now. And if that holds and that continues, then that'll, I think, be encouraging. And I do think, we'll have a season. I don't know what the college football playoff will look like. I know Bill Hancock spoke with Sports Illustrated and sort of gave a no comment on where things stand with that. I'll be interested to see that. Frankly, I'd just be thrilled if there's a 10-game season and an 11-game SEC championship. And I personally, knowing and covering the league, I'd have no problem with whoever won that SEC championship game if they wanted to claim a national title. I'd have no issue with that. So, yeah, and Epic Robinson brings up, the difference between now and the spring. I don't believe COVID is going anywhere. It'll be completely eradicated by the spring. So that is sort of the thing that continues to get brought up and played there. And sort of transitioning now into our second topic, and there have been a lot of comments talking about this. What happens with Justin Fields? Fields, obviously, not a universally popular player within the Georgia sort of confines, but I would encourage you to go to dognation.com, check out the great column that Brandon Adams transferred to Georgia after his freshman year, has an incredible year at Ohio State a season ago, 41 passing touchdowns, 3 interceptions, leads them to a college football playoff game, was probably, in my opinion, the Heisman Trophy favorite going into the season. And he very well may have played his final college snap. He is he will be draft eligible for the 2021 NFL draft, as it'll be his 3rd year removed from high school. And while he may not have the passing reps that, say, a Trevor Lawrence does, or, typically what NFL teams are looking for from a, previous pass rush, both in high school at the college level, he is that talented and that good to potentially still be a first-round NFL draft pick, even with just one season of real tape and reps on the table. Dog Nation's Jeff Santel caught up with Pablo Fields, Justin's father. He said they're going to examine everything and pray to sort of try and figure out what that next step is. I will say it was joked a lot. I think joked is probably the right word about the potential of Fields coming back to Georgia. I'll just sort of put that to rest right here, right now. I'd be very, very surprised if that ends up being the case. For one, Georgia already has an incredibly crowded quarterback room with their 5 scholarship quarterbacks. They've already brought in 2 transfers in Jamie Newman and JT Daniels to go along with Dwan Mathis, Carson Beck, and Stetson Bennett. You bring in a 6th scholarship quarterback. Now, obviously, one of those 5 would probably almost certainly leave. So it's a crowded quarterback room. Georgia's already at 88 scholarships going into this season in the NCAA. I believe by August 20th, the first day of school, Georgia has to get down to 85. But who knows with what the NCAA is doing right now? Complete feckless lack of leadership there. And 2, what these scholarships and scholarship limits might look like. It is certainly something to be aware of and sort of wondering where that goes and what comes next. But 2, I think another thing that's important to keep in mind with this, Justin Fields has worked out and is good friends with Jamie Newman. The 2 worked out together with Quincy Avery. They know each other. They have a very good relationship, I would imagine. They are pals, so to speak. So I would, and again, the NFL draft, I believe Justin Fields will be a first round NFL draft pick. He's got the talent. That's a clear thing. Obviously, from an evaluator standpoint, you'd love to see more reps from him, more high end reps. But at the end of the day, he's proven, I think, from a college football level, that he's a good enough player to be a first round quarterback. I don't know. I would take Trevor Lawrence over. I would take Trevor Lawrence over Justin Fields, but I still believe that he is a first-round draft pick. And Tom Harlow brings up, if he'd stayed at Georgia, there's a very good chance that he'd have sort of 0 seasons under his belt, because while I have gone on record and said that he should have been the starting quarterback, certainly if he had stayed at Georgia for the 2019 season, I believe he almost definitely would have, especially with what we saw from Jake Fromm. And I've litigated in the past over and over again how it's sort of clear now that maybe Kirby did make the wrong decision. But yeah, it is an example of this, a guy who did transfer and wasn't able to play last season because he had to sit out due to the NCAA. And he's a guy now who's going to have another sort of college football season wiped away from him. Now, the NCAA, I'm sure, will do something about the eligibility and what that is. But again, guessing what the NCAA is going to do is sort of a foolish task. And I'm not totally 100% sure of what that would look like. And so you have a lot of these guys who just aren't going to have a ton of tape out there, and it stinks for them. I truly mean that from the bottom. Nigel Combs, yeah, Mitchell Trubisky, that's sort of the thing I'm working with there, with the worry that he only has 1 year on tape. That was what Trubisky had at North Carolina, and it's pretty clear that was potentially a red flag when he got to the NFL level. So that, and I know that scouts and NFL executives, they do look for reps and the number, especially from quarterbacks, the number of pass attempts that they've had both in high school and in college, because Fields was sort of a late bloomer. He got hurt his senior year, so he doesn't have certainly the same level of passing reps that a guy like Trevor Lawrence, who started from his freshman year at Cartersville High School, does compared to Fields. So that's why I do think that you're going to see Lawrence go above Fields in the NFL draft. As far as him coming back to Georgia, I believe Kirby would welcome it. He's a talented player. Obviously, I mentioned before that they would have to sort of figure out how to get under the 85 scholarship limit. But Fields has maintained that Georgia has kept things open, or not open, but they did right by him, so to speak, when he did choose to transfer. But I would not get your hopes up of him suiting up in a Georgia uniform or seeing him in a Georgia uniform this year, even regardless if there is a COVID season. I believe that Justin Fields, unfortunately, for taking Georgia fandom out of this, college football loses by never seeing Justin Fields play another snap. And that's what stinks. Yeah, Joe Cobb-Burt, it's disappointing for the fans, and I'm sure all of you feel that way, but it's worse for the players, especially because as so many of them are clearly now, even now on Georgia, speaking out, saying that they want to have a season. A few Georgia players over the weekend had tweeted out and said that they had wanted to play, but it was not to the same sort of level, and certainly not to the same star power that guys like Lawrence, Fields, Chubba Hubbard, Spencer Rattler at Oklahoma, some of the big players in the Pac-12 and the Big Ten had. Now, later this evening really, James Cook, Zamir White, Malik Herring, Kyrus Jackson, Trey Hill, All of these guys have now taken to Twitter, and these are really the bigger name Georgia players have come out and said that they want to play and they want to see this year. I came back to play ball. That's what I want to do. Same for my teammates. Yeah, he's a guy who bypassed the NFL draft last year, elected to come back for his senior season, and that's very much up in the air right now and what that looks like. And, to Jill's point that she brought up earlier, if there's no season this year, and again, I would caution everyone right now, the SEC is still planning on having a season. That's still their desire. That's still what they want to do. Jason Brett brings up the SEC will not cave in right now. I do tend to believe that, but it's such a bummer for these players to put in all this work and to not even really get a chance to take it to the field, to take it to the practice field, to take it to a game situation. I think that's what's just so disappointing, and to see everything that has unfortunately changed so quickly. Darth Flyer 2020 is horrible. I'll retweet that. That's a very fair point. So yeah, Georgia players are now, I think, sort of speaking out more and discussing more on what they want and making it very clear that they want to play. Matthew Brown, a walk-on linebacker, was interviewed by CNN today, sort of discussing how he felt safe, how he felt comfortable with the possibility of playing, and how, even amid the concerns that some people do have, he felt that for him, the University of Georgia is sort of the safest place for him. And I certainly tend to believe him and believe that because, speaking personally, those guys have access to tests, to medical trainers, medical professionals that a lot of average citizens do not. And while I don't necessarily think all that goes out the door, if there's no season, they're still going to have access to a lot of that. I still believe that these guys are still fundamentally safe. Obviously, that has the potential to change with students coming back on campus at Georgia. That's already starting to happen as classes start on August 20th. And I think that's the biggest thing that the SEC is waiting to look for and waiting to see, sort of how that, specifically at a school like Georgia and in other schools around the SEC, how sort of that takes shape and what sort of effect that has on players and campuses as a whole. And if these campuses, and one of the things Brown talked about is, yes, Kirby understands that these are young guys and they're still growing up, but, these young kids, specifically these football players, have to show maturity. They have to show composure. They have to wear masks, practice social distancing. They have to sort of do all those things to ensure that they have a season. And I believe, based off what Brown had said and knowing these players, that they want to have a season and they're willing to make these sort of sacrifices that are necessary. Now, whether or not they get the chance to follow through with that, it's certainly, unfortunately, maybe not unfortunate is the right word, but that decision isn't going to come from them. It's going to come from the SEC presidents. And from there, Noah Sheldon, I wish this year had never happened. It's unbelievable. I think a very good word to describe this year, where if you told us, January 1st, everything that was going to happen, it's unconscionable to imagine that this is what we'd be staring at, especially still in August now. I'm not going to get political or anything, but, for a country to be where it is, bottom line, I believe if the numbers were better, if instead of, I believe 50, 60,000 cases a day, if it's down in the 20,000 range, 10,000 range, deaths aren't over 1,000 per day. This is a very different conversation, but unfortunately that's where we are. And we're now trying to figure it out and how to navigate the risk in all of this and sort of where you go. By the way, thank you. A slight humorous aside here. I know you guys are wanting me to wear Georgia gear more, and I acquiesced today, but that's a picture of Sanford Stadium right there. You can see over there, that's my degree from the University of Georgia. The Georgia football team with the media and the journalism thing, it's always been a little bit weird for me. Two, I don't own a ton of Georgia gear, but, from removing the football aspect and covering it, I love the University of Georgia. I love the town of Athens. It breaks my heart that if there's no college football season, I'm very worried about some of the places that I have such fond memories of from my college days and what that might mean for them and those establishments. Magnolia's was my favorite bar. I literally have a painting of it in another room in my apartment, and it's a very clear worry and concern about what that might look like for them, with no football season. They're not alone. A lot of the Athens businesses, it's certainly concerning and worrying. And, the lack of a college football season, while I get understanding, you want to protect these guys, you want to protect these people. I know a lot of good people in the Athens community are going to be hurt by not having this and by not having the season. And, it's tough and it's hard and it's difficult. And that's unfortunately the reality we are now living with. So, I believe that the SEC is going to try and push through. Push through may not be the right word, but they're going to do everything they can to have a season. I've always believed that. Whether that comes true or not, we'll see. But I think the important thing to keep in mind is that I do believe that the SEC is going to go to the fullest in making sure that they have a season, and that if there is not a season, then it truly could not have been done, because I believe the SEC will be, whether it wants to be or not, will sort of be the last Power 5 conference standing in trying to have a season. And that's a lot of weight to put on one conference in terms of, all right, we've got these 4 power conferences that are sort of all playing by the same rules. That's a lot of weight to put on one of them. And Wes Underwood, let's just start the season in the middle of November. I know a lot of Big Ten coaches and Big Ten people were upset that they made the decision to go ahead and push it to the spring and not, at the very least, push it back to the September 26th date and deadline that the SEC had sort of started and stated. And, who's to say that you couldn't essentially move things back 1 month at a time, especially, maybe it's a little bit different in the Big Ten given the climate up there. But in the SEC and the southern states and most of the Pac-12, I would say as well, you can sort of be flexible with your schedule and move it back a little bit more. So, Dorsey Roser, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Yeah, I believe that the NFL is going to have a season this year. And again, part of it is the bubble, but the bubble, yes, while it's a concern, and yes, you can bring up the baseball and with the Cardinals and Marlins and what has happened with. I would also point out that 28 other teams haven't had those same COVID issues. And while, yes, one is certainly enough, I think those people have shown in that, for the most part, a successful season without a bubble could possibly be done. It'll be interesting to see, I think, where baseball goes from here. I could come back to regret those words and eat those words. But you look at teams like the Mets, Red Sox, every team except for the Marlins, who I believe are actually leading the NL East and back on the field now, and the St. Louis Cardinals, those teams are playing. And if everyone on one team tests negative and everyone on another team tests negative, they're going to come together and they're going to play. And now maybe the tests slip through and you don't, someone tests pot, or someone develops or comes in contact with someone who has the virus after their testing. I would think that'd be very difficult, and the coaches would be absolutely furious if that happened. But once you get them and once everyone is negative onto the field, it's not like, the coronavirus is now more susceptible there. The reason and the concern is if someone does go to practice and play with it, and specifically the offensive and defensive linemen, just the contact they come in with, that they spread it around to people. But if you are able to constantly test in these universities with all the money that they have, and I think money is an important and very big thing to keep in mind with this, if they're willing to fund this and try and put it on, try and reap some of the financial benefits from all this, then they should feel free to go ahead and do so. These schools are not poor. Money is clearly not an issue for them, with a lot of them making, 9 figures, or at least, maybe not profit, but they're making money and they're spending it like crazy. And so if they have to spend more on medical expenses to try and put on a season, I'm okay with that. I don't, it's, if they want to try and make it happen, these are the things that they have to do. And they, I believe, fully understand that. So we've got about 25 minutes here. You guys have any questions, comments? I'll open it up now. I've sort of stood on my box. What comes next as far as the SEC? And I stall here to give a little bit more comments and questions and allow them to roll in. I think if the SEC is serious about having a season and serious about trying to continue to have one, we'll hear on a schedule some point this week or next of sort of who Georgia is playing when. Last week they came out on Friday, announced that they were going to play Arkansas and Mississippi State. There's a lot of excitement over that. And then over the weekend, it changed very, very quickly. But if the SEC is as serious with this as Greg Sankey has seemed to indicate, then we'll find out a full schedule at some point, because that's sort of the next step that they have to do and sort of go from there. So we'll be interested to see there. Frank Patterson, who is the next big commitment that we should be on the lookout for? Yeah, Brock Bowers officially pulled the trigger on Monday. Yesterday, God, that feels forever ago. But He commits. He's from Napa, California. He's a guy who I think is a very different type of tight end, and I think that's good. He's a better athlete than I think Georgia has had in that sort of room in a long time. And bringing in a guy like him, especially pulling him out of Napa, California, especially in a time where visits aren't allowed from the NCAA, I think that says a lot of both Todd Hartley, which I wrote about this morning, and sort of the power and appeal of Georgia. And, going forward, Mims is, I believe, the biggest name on the board, both in a literal sense and in a what landing him would mean. I think Shmuel Munden is number 2, but as we've seen already this summer, I don't think anyone really knows when that commitment might be coming. And that, as we all know right now, or at least the people that are plugged in know, that's a contested battle between Auburn and Georgia right there. You have guys like Xavier Sori, who I believe is going to take his recruitment the distance. You have Terrion Arnold, who's going to take his to February. Those are some of the bigger targets for Georgia in this class. So, Bowers is a nice win there. You have Mims on the board. He's committing October 14th. I'd be very surprised if that wasn't Georgia on that date, and that's a nice little win for them there. Yeah, Georgia's going to be fine. They're still, they might not sign a top one class or a top 2 class like normal years under Kirby Smart, because just the lack of visits and the lack of an ability to get in front of prospects and tell them and show them what Georgia can do for them. But I think they're still, with what they've been able to do in state, which was much better than it was in previous years, and sort of the Georgia brand, that they're still going to be able to sign a top 5 class, bring in some great players, and put together a class that is still competing with the national elites like an Ohio State and Alabama, Clemson, and LSU of the world. I know Jacob O'Neill asked earlier who was the recruit that Ohio State lost today. I'm going to butcher his name almost certainly. Tunmais Adelaide. He is a borderline 4-star, 5-star. He's like right on the cusp. He's at IMG Academy. I believe there are rumors of him going to Florida. I've heard Texas A&M. I've heard Oklahoma. But Ohio State, which had the number 1 recruiting class, and I think still does have the number 1 recruiting class in the country, they lose a decommitment today. Sorry I didn't get to that earlier today. John William Adams brings out Isaac Nutta, shouting out Brock Bowers. How do their games compare? They're very different. Isaac Nutta was a very good tight end, but he was not the same athlete that Brock Bowers is. Not as bigger, 6'5", though not really 6'5", I believe measured in at 6'4". But Bowers is a very, very good athlete. He is, I believe, a faster, better athlete, quicker side to side, quicker laterally than sort of guys Georgia has had in that room in the past. And, bringing Darnell Washington is great. I think he's going to be a real mismatch for teams. But having a guy as big as him who can sort of be that inline blocker, a guy who put his hand down on the end of the line, and also in the red zone sort of make mismatch plays over smaller defenders, I think Bowers is the type of guy who over the middle of the field, those in between the 20s, he's a guy that is going to be able to pick up big yardage for you. So I think that's sort of where he represents ultimately is. And if he does get there, what comes next in terms of how the Georgia offense changes to sort of incorporate Bowers into it, because I think he's got the capability and the possibility to split out wide and sort of be a jumbo wide receiver, so to say. So I think that'll be very interesting and where he goes from there. String Gene asks, is it too late to mix the ACC and the SEC teams this season? Steve Spurrier had a great zinger today about the SEC and the ACC teams playing. You should just let them play and let their conference champions decide, play for a national title. And he joked that that's what it was going to be anyway. So in that circumstance, I imagine it'll be the winner of the SEC, which could be Alabama, Georgia, God forbid, Florida, LSU. Actually, that's a very interesting hypothetical I want to ask you guys. Would you want there to be a season if it meant that Florida was going to win the SEC? Obviously you'd love to see football. I think all of us would. But if that's the end result, is that something we really want? Is that something Georgia, and I don't mean we, but is that something Georgia fans really want to see Florida at the end of this year, at the end of a 10-game schedule, standing in Atlanta, winning it all? Just an interesting thing to sort of throw out there. Yeah, Frank Patterson, he brings up, what if 50 players from each Big Ten team enter the portal? I would be sort of wary about where things go from there and what that means and what comes next for those leagues, because if the SEC, ACC, and Big 12 are able to pull off seasons, and that's a gigantic if right now, it's going to make things very difficult for the Big Ten going forward. You've already sort of seen one coach, I believe, reached out to a reporter and said that they're already hurting in recruiting because of sort of this perception about the Big Ten that they don't care about football nearly as much as those other schools do. So, yeah, Joe Kopberg, it's a lousy hypothetical. I think we all lose either way. But I think from a sort of perception going forward, if the SEC and the ACC and the Big 12 are able to pull off a season this year, I think that has a pretty long-lasting ramifications on both the ability of those schools to recruit. I think obviously Ohio State, Michigan, the really big boys will be fine, but you're going to have kids from all over the country sort of look sideways at those schools and say, is that really a place I want to go where when things get tough, they cancel the season on me and I'm sort of left, at a place where I can't do what I came to do. So, well, Jerry, it's just a hypothetical. They're not winning at all. They win the SEC. Again, as Joe brought up, it's a pretty terrible hypothetical. So, Kyle Ford brings up, if all else fails, let Georgia and Alabama meet in Mercedes-Benz for the only bowl. I'd be down for that, but I'd want an amendment to that. I want to make sure that Ole Miss and Mississippi State find a way to play football this season. If you want to quarantine their players for 2 weeks beforehand, I'm all for it. But that game, just given how just absolutely ridiculous and absurd it is, if we only get one college football game this year, Georgia, Alabama might be number one, probably should be number one, but Ole Miss, Mississippi State should be number two because that game's just going to be stupid fun and what sort of makes college football great. So we'll go probably about another 3 good minutes to sort of see what comes next. I know, Feinbaum has the national championship this season. I don't even want to know or think that far in advance of what the college football playoff might look like. If we get an SEC season and there's an SEC champion, I will have no qualms. And if it's Georgia, if they want to go play those extra games and make that extra money, I'm fine. I'll certainly go cover it. Probably not in person, but I'll do what I can there. But if we get that SEC season, I think that's going to satisfy a lot of Georgia fans, even if it has an unhappy ending as it has from time to time in recent years. So, yeah, I see a lot of people suggesting where Justin Fields might go. I bet very good money that he never plays another collegiate snap. Certainly not even in an SEC. I think the next time you see Justin Fields, he will be wearing, on a football field, he will be wearing an NFL uniform. So, while it's fun to speculate and see that, that's where I just don't – I'd hate to get anyone's hopes up into thinking that that's a realistic or plausible sort of scenario. So we'll sort of see there. Mike Zambezi, this is a good one. I think Arkansas should play Vanderbilt in the Rose Bowl this year. That'd be pretty funny. A week ago when this came out, Arkansas and Missouri pretty clearly got jobbed in terms of the schedule that they have to play. Arkansas getting on top of the SEC West, the best 2 teams in the East, Florida and Georgia, and then Missouri getting Alabama and LSU. I would, if we have a season, I would set the over-under on Arkansas wins at half a win, and I think it's going to be the under. So, them and Vanderbilt, there's a very good chance those 2 schools they combine to not win a game this season. So we'll sort of see where things go from there. Make sure to tune in to Dog Nation Daily. Brandon Adams will be back on tomorrow. He's been really strong this week in terms of the content and what he's been able to give. Mike Griffith will be his guest tomorrow. I'm sure they'll have great discussion about what comes next for Georgia. I know we've got Jeff Santella before the Hedges tomorrow night. That'll be a lot of fun. I'm sure he's got great insight. Furthermore, on Bowers and how Georgia landed him and what sort of the recruiting reaction is to all this and where things go from there. On Thursday, as far as I know, we're going to have another Cover 4 again. Those have been really good the last 2 weeks. There's been plenty to talk about and plenty to discuss going forward. So it'll be interesting to see what comes up on that broadcast. We've been pretty passionate on there the last couple of weeks, so that'll be fun. And then you have Friday Night Mike on Friday to sort of recap the whole week. So, Dog Nation, we're still going to keep churning out videos, even as it looks that the college football season is falling apart. We're still here. We're still going. And we'll be excited. hopefully there's a season for us to cover, and we're going to give you the best access and the best sort of knowledge and news that everything can say. So, with that, just stay hopeful, stay safe out there, practice social distancing, wear a mask, and just keep on keeping on. I'll see you guys when I see you. Have a great Tuesday night. Don't know why my accent changed there, but hope everyone continues to do well and stay well. My name is Connor Riley for Dog Nation. We'll see you again.